Here's your guide on how to play Infernus. Before we jump into the abilities, let's talk about some of his base stats. So he has higher health than some of the other characters that start at like 550, for example. He starts at 625. And I think maybe the most important thing, other than his unique gun, is that he has 3 stamina bars, or like 3 dashes that he can use. So he doesn't have too much mobility in his kit. You're going to have to end up buying a lot of mobility, but this character ends up being very strong, especially mid to late game. So let's talk about his abilities. The first one is his Catalyst. He throws a Napalm. It's a small AoE that slows enemy movement and also amplifies damage to any enemies standing in it. I'm not sure if this does amplified damage to creeps. I would imagine it does. It doesn't actually specify here, but it does 25% damage amp. It also does 50 damage by itself and slows by 40%. I would say that leveling this thing up is not going to be your priority, but getting that first charge is going to definitely be helpful, because this character not only needs this for his full combo, but it's a 24-second cooldown, so having an extra charge will definitely help. So this thing basically looks like this. It, doesn't last for a long time, but when used correctly, it will definitely deal a lot of damage. I mean, 25% extra damage is quite a bit. Moving on to his next ability, Flame Dash. Flame Dash is a very interesting ability. There's many ways to use it. I'm going to demonstrate. First off, you can just press the ability. Don't use the speed boost. And I find this is easiest when you're trying to go ahead and follow a character who doesn't have much mobility left. Maybe they have no stamina. You're just trying to make like kind of a pool around them. Or you can use this ability to kind of like clear a creep wave. You can walk in the creep wave. But typically, if you're trying to initiate a fight, or if you're trying to escape a fight, that's one of the only times you pretty much use this ability, other than, attacking or clearing a creep wave. You're going to use the speed boost the whole time because you go so much farther. I would argue it's probably about 30% farther just for using the speed boost the whole time. There's no extra penalty for using that, there's not like a longer cooldown. So basically, if you're going to use that ability and you're not clearing a creep wave, I would definitely recommend speed boost every time, just so you can get more out of it. But I guess a few more things I'd like to talk about is the very first tier slows fire rate of enemies by 30%. This is massive in team fights. You can imagine everyone fire rate slows down by 30%. Your team is going to definitely get an advantage from that. So keep that in mind. I would say this is one that you would consider maxing out, if not the next one, which we're about to talk about, because you get more DPS. Basically, anyone that's walking through it or chasing you is going to take a lot of damage. And of course, cooldown. Getting some cooldown reduction would be very important. Next, let's talk about Afterburn. Your bullets build up to apply a burning effect on enemies and also creeps and also jungle creeps. Infernus's bullets and abilities will refresh the duration. So this is kind of what Afterburn looks like. There's that thing at the top. Once it triggers that, and you can kind of keep shooting to keep it going, but basically this does damage over time, and this is going to be one of the best tools that Infernus has. So you can use it on a jungle creep. You might be able to use like a whole clip and then just kind of let it die on its own. Okay, unfortunately that was a little bit unlucky, but you get the idea. You can kind of go in, farm the jungle, and it will kind of kill itself. And same with creep waves, you can do the same thing. If you basically apply Afterburn to a creep wave, it's most likely going to kill itself, so that's great. You can just kind of let it just die on its own, and you get the souls, and then save time. You can move around the map. The things about Afterburn I'd like to mention is, first off, the first tier, if you trigger it, victims deal 30% less spirit damage. So depending on what lane you go against, obviously as this game evolves, people are going to know which lanes to go and how to counter them, etc., etc. This is going to be very powerful against enemies who want to use a lot of spells. So like, let's just say if somehow you were fighting Infernus with Infernus, this would counter Infernus. You know what I mean? And on top of that, burn duration, self-explanatory, more DPS is going to be super good. So Afterburn is super good, especially early game, especially mid game when it comes to farming. Something important to note about Afterburn is, depending on the distance away from the target, it may require more or less bullets to actually trigger Afterburn. To add on to that, headshots will actually trigger Afterburn faster than body shots. Let's talk about his ult though, which is Concussive Combustion. Basically, it turns Infernus into a bomb and explodes after 3 seconds, and it has a decent radius. It does some decent damage, but it stuns everyone caught in it for 1.25 seconds. If you look, tier 1 takes 40 seconds off the cooldown, which is massive. So no items alone, you're already going to get it to 80 seconds, which is huge. On top of that, the second tier is going to add 0.5 second stun and also increase the radius by a little bit. I would say those two are going to be your priority for leveling this thing. The final one is obviously good too, don't get me wrong, getting some lifesteal, some more damage, but I would say the first two are going to be your main priority. When you use this thing, it kind of looks like this, and it eventually just pops. One thing I should definitely mention about his ult is you kind of have a choice when you use it, if you want to shoot or if you want to use Flame Dash. On top of that, you can use Catalyst during it. So here's one example of how to use the ult. You would kind of run up, use Catalyst, and just explode on somebody. Or what you can do is, let's say someone's cornered, you can start using Afterburn and just apply everything you can, and it's going to do kind of the same damage. It kind of depends on the situation. If you're trying to catch a bunch of people, you're probably going to use Flame Dash. You can spam Catalyst if you have it up, and then you're probably going to get the most out of it. If it's a 1v1 situation, you might be able to just get away with Catalyst and try to spam for Afterburn. That's also definitely a viable option. It's going to be up to you. But as you have your ult up, make sure that you're using the other abilities that you can use, because that's just going to increase the damage output significantly. Now that we talked about the abilities, let's talk about some of the items I think you should buy. Now, I have a guide in the game if you guys want to check it out. But first, let's start off with Basic Magazine. I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. You want to be able to trigger Afterburn a little bit easier. It does take quite a bit of bullets to trigger Afterburn sometimes, and especially in the heat of the game, it's easy to miss bullets. You have to basically hit a bunch in a row to trigger it efficiently. Next, I would recommend Enduring Spirit, because not only do you get bonus health, but some Spirit Lifesteal. This is going to help you sustain a lot easier. Basically, if Afterburn's going off on creeps, on anything, you're going to be healing a little bit over time. After that, you could consider Extra Spirit if you do have some money to spare, but I would say Extra Stamina and Sprint Boots, because you don't really want to use Flame Dash to move around very much. Having some extra mobility will definitely help this character quite a bit. On top of that, if you're in a duo lane and you've been playing this character a little bit, you could consider Rapid Rounds. If you're in a duo lane, I don't recommend this for a solo lane because you get minus max health, but you get faster fire rate. You might be able to apply Afterburn a little bit quicker, so this is something to consider. After the early game, you're about to hit your very first power spike, which is Active Reload. Active Reload might be the most powerful item for Infernus. So basically, Active Reload, once you're in a close quarters combat, if you reload at the right time, it will reload for you. Now obviously it just keeps on reloading because I have no cooldown, but if I just run out, it won't pop up. One thing to mention though is if you spray your whole clip, for example, and you're not in a fight, you don't have to use Active Reload, and then next time you go, you'll still have it ready to go. So basically, it's just going to be on cooldown. Imagine it's an ability. One thing to mention, other than that you get an instant reload, is that it decreases reload time. The weapon damage is great, but that's not why we care about it. On top of that, you do get a little bit of bullet lifesteal, so this will help a lot for sustain in early game. You also get some fire rate if you get the instant reload, but the biggest thing I want you to keep note of is the passive cooldown timer. So this ability, I guess, or item, has a 17-second cooldown timer, but if you also buy some cooldown items, you can reduce that a little bit. I will say, even if you buy some cooldown, it's probably going to be around 16 seconds. So only use this if you're fighting or if you're going to clear like some creep waves or some jungle. Don't just waste this because, you know, you don't want to end up in a situation where you need it. On top of this, if you mistime it like I just did on purpose, you won't be able to use it. You're going to have to wait until the cooldown refreshes. So be careful with this thing. Once you get used to it, you'll probably be able to do it every single time. It's not too crazy. And once you get used to the timing, it's not going to be any problem at all. You won't even think about it. You'll just press it and go. So next, let's talk about Spirit Lifesteal. This is pretty self-explanatory, but 23% Spirit Lifesteal and bonus health. This is pretty much a no-brainer. This will help you out immensely. Next, super powerful item for him, in my opinion, is Torment Pulse. So you get 125 bonus health, some spirit power, but you do spirit damage periodically to nearby enemies. So if I attack this guy, it's going to start pulsing him over and over and over again. So when you're fighting creep waves or you're fighting enemies, this thing is going to do a whole bunch of damage. On top of that, it will, I think, lifesteal a little bit for you if you have spirit lifesteal. So all around, this is a great thing, and it hits up to 2 targets at once. So in team fights, you're going to be dishing out more damage. So I think this is a must for Infernus. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But anyways, let's talk about his core items. There's really just one that I feel like you should get. After that, it's kind of up to you, but we'll get to that in a second. I believe Diviner's Kevlar is probably his best item for obvious reasons. If you're going to ult in, this is probably going to be the bread and butter of your gameplay, especially later on. You don't want to die during this. You want to be a little bit tanky, so having those big shields on you is going to keep you alive. And on top of that, not to mention, you do get some more spirit lifesteal and some cooldown reduction and spirit power. So this is just an all-around like amazing item for him. 6,300 I think is totally worth it. Next, you can consider Surge of Power. I would put this on Catalyst or Flame Dash. This is kind of more situational. Depends on what ability you feel like you'll get the most out of. Typically, I put this on Flame Dash. So when I run by, let's just take this off. I'll go a little bit faster. And also I do a bit more damage, so it helps with clearing creep waves and also just fighting in general. After Diviner's Kevlar, I feel like that's the main core item. You might have more core items based on what's going on in the game, but let's talk about some of the other items I think are really good on Infernus. So one you can consider right away is Superior Stamina. This will help you move around more if you need to. If it's really late in the game, you might just not need this that much, and in that case, I would recommend Titanic Magazine right away. This is pretty obvious. Your magazine becomes a lot bigger, and on top of that, you still have active reload, so you'll have 56 bullets. You can just get that instant reload, and then all of a sudden, 56 bullets again. Something I would mention about this, though, is if you kind of try and time it, so you see my cooldown in the bottom left, it's about to come back. If you don't wait, you might not get the active reload. So even though it was up by the time I was done spraying, it didn't let me use this. So what I would do if I were you is just wait a second and then make sure this is all the way up so you can use active reload. After that, there's definitely a few other things I would recommend you check out. One of them is Intensifying Magazine, just for more ammo, and you get some weapon damage. That's great and all, but basically the more ammo, the better. I would recommend, if you have a lot of souls remaining, Ricochet. The reason I like Ricochet is because you can basically spread your afterburn to enemies. So I feel like this is pretty broken. Not only are you going to do a million damage, but you're going to heal a ton, and team fights are just going to be a lot more fun for you. On top of that, let's just say it goes to really late game, like a 45-minute game, you could always consider Boundless Spirit. And then you could even go back and get Duration Extender, Mystic Vulnerability to, help with team fights, and then also Bullet Resist Shredder to help with team fights. So basically when you deal spirit damage, you remove some of their bullet resist, and then same with Mystic Vulnerability, you remove some of their spirit resist, and also there's upgraded versions of these things that you can definitely consider. So Escalating Exposure is going to be way down here. Now if you're looking to upgrade bullet resist, you might have to go back to the weapon tab and find something here, because in the spirit tab, Mystic Vulnerability and then Escalating Exposure is probably the best way to get rid of some of their spirit resist. So it depends on your team, it depends on the situation. But anyways, let's talk about gameplay. So Infernus is really strong if you're good with him. I feel like this is a very high skill ceiling character. So early on, you're going to be looking to farm, of course. You're going to be looking to proc afterburn as much as possible to go ahead and harass the enemy laner or laners. I think Infernus probably works best in a duo lane, but you can definitely go solo. You just have to be very careful in the sense that you don't have too much mobility. You don't really have any dashes. You do have Flame Dash, but you're going to have to sacrifice it. Around level 2 or 3, or basically once you get more abilities, you can actually initiate with Flame Dash. It does do quite a bit of damage when you're standing close range. I would wait till you have Catalyst at least, and of course hopefully you have some Spirit Lifesteal by then. You might actually be able to win a 1v1 close up. I would say for the most part you're going to lose a lot of 1v1s early on, so be very careful and don't overextend even though you feel very powerful, because this is more of like a poke a damage over time champion. It's not one that's going to all of a sudden just take over the lane with like 400 damage at a time. This is going to be one that you kind of just keep on pressuring and pressuring and pressuring. You have to be a little bit patient with this character. Eventually you're going to get to the mid game where you're kind of moving around the map, maybe looking for a place to use your ult, ganks, and you're also looking to farm jungle, especially when you get Torment Pulse. You're able to pick up a lot of creep waves, so you're just waiting around for team fights at this point. Eventually when you get to late game, you have Diviner's Kevlar, and you're basically just a team player at this point. Literally, your play can make or break the game. You can easily come back, like in this game right here. They're in our base and we actually end up winning this one, even though they're pretty much about to fight our patron. So you never know what you can set up with this character. This is going to be like the shot caller, I would imagine. So if you're playing with a group of friends, you might want to be making the calls or having people tell you like all the info that's going on, because you want to be able to set up big ults and help everyone just kill everyone. You have one of the best tools to initiate, to continue to end team fights. Actually, let's just say everyone dies but everyone's low, you have the potential to actually just go in and wipe them. When they're stunned, you can probably use Catalyst, you can use Flame Dash, you're able to spray the remaining enemies. So this is all around a really good character, but I will say he's a bit of a glass cannon in the sense that you have to be very careful and you can't just mindlessly go in. You have to be watching the map, you have to coordinate with the team. So if you're looking for a character that can like solo carry the game, this might not be the character for you, but I feel like this is definitely a team player when it comes to Deadlock. Anyways guys, that's the guide. Hopefully you enjoy. Check out my guide in the game. Comment down below what you guys think about this character, and I'll see you guys in the next one.